My name is Caleb Thomas, and I live on the edge of Oak Ridge, a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Atlanta. If you were to drive down Willow Creek Lane, you'd find a line of modest one-story homes with weathered siding and lawns that scream self-maintained. That's where I've spent the last 12 years, mowing my own grass, fixing my own leaky faucets, and praying that my 20-year-old Ford Escape wouldn't give up on me before the next paycheck. I work as a freelance electrician, which sounds fancier than it is. Most weeks, I get a few gigs fixing wiring in basements or installing light fixtures in small offices. It's honest work, hard work, but it barely keeps me ahead of the bills. Some months, I'm juggling overdue notices and figuring out which utility can wait another week. I don't complain, though. I come from people who believe dignity isn't tied to income, but to effort. My father worked in a steel mill till his lungs gave out. My mother worked night shifts at a diner. I carry that same grit in my bones. Across the street from me, in a mansion so glossy it practically blinds you when the sun hits it, lives Bradley McAllister, the kind of man who introduces himself with his full name and title, Bradley McAllister, CEO of McAllister Equity Holdings. He wears suits even on Sundays and somehow makes drinking coffee on the porch look like a stock photo ad for success. Bradley's house is the only three-story property in the neighborhood. Sleek gray brick, marble columns, a luxury car in the driveway that probably costs more than everything I own, including the tools I use to make a living. And he reminds me of that constantly. I remember one morning I was rolling my toolbox into my beat-up truck when he called out from across the street. "Morning, Caleb. Off to save the world one light bulb at a time." He laughed before I could reply, the sound echoing like a smirk. I forced a smile, tightened the strap on my gear bag, and drove off. I'd heard worse, sure. But something about Bradley's tone always carried a punch. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he looked at me. Like I was furniture that came with the view, an inevitable eyesore in his curated landscape. I tried not to let it get to me. My focus was my work and, more importantly, my sister Rachel and her daughter Aubrey. They'd moved in with me after Rachel's divorce last year, and life had gotten even tighter. Aubrey was 6, full of questions and mischief, and the kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. She painted with chalk on the driveway, always leaving me messages like, "You are the best uncle." I taped them inside my tool truck. That morning started like most. I made eggs and toast for Aubrey, packed Rachel's lunch for her shift at the hospital, and kissed them both goodbye. Then I loaded up my truck and headed toward a job at a retirement center on the west side. I was replacing ceiling fixtures. Nothing glamorous, but the pay was decent. As I pulled out, I saw Bradley standing beside a man in a navy suit, pointing at my house. He didn't lower his voice. "That's the kind of property that brings down value, Greg. Paint's peeling, cars rusting. It's like the neighborhood charity case." I stopped the truck in the middle of the road. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. I almost stepped out. Almost. But then I saw Aubrey's drawing taped to the dashboard, a blue heart with the word "strong" written in bubble letters. I took a breath and drove on. But something inside me shifted. That night, as I sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, I watched Bradley's house light up, one room after another like a Hollywood set. He was hosting a cocktail party. Cars with tinted windows lined the street, and music spilled out in expensive jazz chords. People in suits and cocktail dresses laughed in the driveway like they'd never had a hard day in their lives. Rachel joined me on the porch after putting Aubrey to bed. She followed my gaze. "You know," she said, "if arrogance were currency, he'd be richer than he already is." I chuckled. "He already is. But you've got something he doesn't," she said, nudging me. "You've got peace." I raised an eyebrow. "You call working 16 hours to barely cover bills peace?" She smiled. "You sleep well. You don't lie or cheat to get ahead. Your niece adores you. That's wealth, Caleb. He just doesn't see it." Still, that didn't change the sting. The resentment in me was growing roots. Every time I saw Bradley toss his keys to a valet like he owned the street, or overheard him mock someone for driving a carburetor on wheels, I burned a little hotter. But what could I do? I was just a tradesman, a nobody in his eyes. One Thursday, about 2 weeks after that party, something odd happened. I was working at a local coffee shop, fixing the blown fuse in their back prep room, when I overheard a strange conversation. Two men in suits were seated near the hallway. "So McAllister's fund is bleeding, huh?" one of them said. "No one's investing in real estate trusts anymore, especially not his. Heard he leveraged his own mansion as collateral." My ears perked up. "No way," the other replied. "Bradley's been over-leveraging everything. If this thing collapses, he'll drown." I finished my job and left quickly, trying to act casual. But my heart was thudding. Could it be true? Was the mighty Bradley McAllister, with his manicured lawn and shiny cars, skating on financial thin ice? I didn't have long to wonder. The next day, a moving truck showed up at Bradley's house. Not a full one, just a couple of guys carrying out artwork, boxes labeled files, and what looked like designer suits. He stood on the porch, tense and red-faced, barking at someone over the phone. 2 days later, the marble fountain in front of his house went dry. A week after that, one of his two artists disappeared. Then his wife, Kendra, stopped showing up altogether. I didn't celebrate. Not openly. But I noticed. And I remembered. Then one night, just as I was putting Aubrey to bed, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and there he was, Bradley McAllister, the man who once mocked my truck and my life, standing on my porch. He looked different. Deflated. His eyes were sunken, his tie loose. "Caleb," he said quietly, "I need your help." I didn't speak. I just stared at him, trying to believe what I was seeing. "I wouldn't ask," he continued, "but you're the only one who knows how to rewire the units in the new Sunset building downtown. I was supposed to deliver it for a major client next week. My contractor bailed. And if I don't get it done..." He didn't finish. I folded my arms. "Why me?" "Because I've seen your work. You're good. And because..." He hesitated, voice cracking slightly. "You're the only one who hasn't laughed at me lately." I wanted to laugh then. Hard. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "Let me think about it." Then I closed the door, leaving him standing on my porch. As I turned, Aubrey looked up from the hallway. "Was that the man with the big house?" she asked. "Yeah," I said softly. "It was." "What did he want?" I looked down at her. "Help." She blinked. "Are you gonna help him?" I didn't answer. Not yet. But deep down, I knew one thing for sure. The world had shifted. And for once, it shifted in my favor. I didn't sleep much that night. Bradley's face kept flashing in my mind. How lost he looked standing on my porch, the same man who once called my home visual pollution. Now he was the one desperate for help. By morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Please, Caleb." "I'll pay." "You name the price." "Bradley." I stared at the message, thumb hovering. For a second, I considered deleting it. But curiosity won. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed to know more. That evening, I dropped by Michael's Hardware, where I usually get supplies. Mike, the owner, knows everyone in town. As I picked up a fresh coil of insulated wire, he leaned over the counter. "You hear about McAllister?" he whispered. I raised an eyebrow. "What now?" "Word is, one of his investors filed a lawsuit. Breach of contract. Apparently, Bradley promised returns he couldn't deliver. The guy's drowning." "Serious?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Serious enough that he came in here yesterday trying to return $800 worth of lighting systems," said the buyer pulled out. I nodded slowly, absorbing it. The king was crumbling. Later that week, I visited the Sunset Building, a half-finished commercial space on the edge of the business district. Bradley mentioned it. I figured I'd see what he was so desperate about. The place was a mess. Exposed wiring dangled from ceilings. The elevator installation was half done. Electrical conduits were incorrectly mapped, meaning if it was activated in this state, it could cause a fire. I stood in the middle of the dust-covered marble lobby and let out a slow whistle. He needed a miracle. Fast. I called Rachel that night. "Do you think I'd be crazy to help him?" I asked. There was a long pause. "That depends," she said. "Are you doing it to help him, or to help yourself? I didn't answer right away. I wasn't even sure. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe both. If you're going to help him, she added, make sure he knows who's in control this time. That stuck with me. The next morning, I replied to Bradley's text. Meet me at the Sunset Building. 8 a.m. Don't be late. He was already there when I arrived, standing awkwardly in a wrinkled suit. His hands were in his pockets, and his face lit up when he saw me. Caleb, thank you for coming. I haven't agreed to anything yet, I said, walking past him. He followed me as I inspected the wiring, taking notes and photos. You know this is a disaster, right? I said, gesturing at a panel that looked like a kid had wired it blindfolded. I know, he said quickly. I hired a cheap crew, contracted out of state. They vanished halfway through. Now I've got clients breathing down my neck, a breach of delivery clause in the contract, and no one to finish the job. I leaned against a ladder. So, you want me to fix a building that's one bad connection away from going up in flames in under a week? I'll pay double your rate. I stared at him. Triple. I want more than money, Bradley, I said. He looked startled. What do you mean? I want control. My team. My methods. No micromanaging. And I want my name on the final paperwork as lead contractor. Not yours. The muscles in his jaw twitched, but he nodded. Fine. That day, I called in favors from every electrician and contractor I'd ever helped for cheap or bailed out in emergencies. Some were reluctant, but once I mentioned Bradley McAllister was involved, they were all in. About time that man learned what real work looks like, said Theo, a longtime friend who ran a drywall business. For the next 6 days, we worked from dawn till near midnight. I didn't just manage the job, I led it. My hands were dirty, my clothes soaked in sweat, but I was alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Bradley hovered sometimes, offering to assist, but I kept him at a distance. I noticed he didn't carry his usual arrogance anymore. Instead, he watched with something closer to humility, or maybe awe, as the project took shape under my leadership. Midweek, while I was reviewing wiring blueprints in the break room, he approached me. Can I ask you something, Caleb? I didn't look up. You just did. He chuckled awkwardly. I mean, how did you get so good at this? I finally looked at him. Because I had to. People like me don't get chances handed to them. We build them. One outlet at a time. He nodded, swallowing hard. Truth is, he admitted, I never thought I'd need someone like you. I smiled faintly. And I never thought you'd have to ask. That night, I stayed behind alone, making sure the power distribution panel was fully aligned with the safety specs. The building was quiet, but I could still hear Bradley's words echoing in my head. Never thought I'd need someone like you. I didn't care if it came from desperation. It still felt good. 2 days before the deadline, something happened that nearly derailed everything. One of the city inspectors came early. I was up on a scaffold when I heard shouting from downstairs. Who signed off on this schematic? This is filed under McAllister Holdings. I climbed down fast. The inspector, a stern woman named Cynthia Ramos, was holding a clipboard. This is your name on the electrical plan now? She asked. Yes, I said confidently. And you're qualified? I'm certified. Licensed. Check the database. She did. Then she turned to Bradley, who stood frozen. Mr. McAllister, we'll need to revise your ownership documents. The city has concerns about your changing contractors mid-project without notice. Bradley blinked. I was just trying to meet the deadline. I suggest you let Mr. Thomas take the lead from here, Cynthia said. Or this project will fail inspection. For the first time in my life, a city official looked at me as the expert in the room. And Bradley? He looked at me like I was his lifeline. That night, Theo clapped me on the back. You realize what's happening, right? He said. You're not just helping him. You're replacing him. By the 7th day, the Sunset Building was nearly complete. Where once there were sparking wires and unfinished drywall, there were now gleaming copper conduits, clean breaker boxes, LED paneling, and functional elevator wiring. It wasn't just progress, it was transformation. My transformation. And everyone noticed. The inspectors, who once barely gave me the time of day, now nodded in respect. Contractors who used to avoid my calls now asked if I was hiring. Even Bradley's client, a venture capitalist named Neil Forsberg, came down to tour the site and offered me a handshake. "You're the guy who salvaged this?" Neil asked, walking alongside me down a corridor that used to be a mess of hazard tape. "I just brought in the right crew," I said modestly. "Well, that's more leadership than most CEOs can manage." I caught Bradley flinching in the background. That night, after everyone left, Bradley stayed behind. I found him sitting alone in one of the finished offices, staring out the window. His once flawless suit was wrinkled, and his eyes carried the weight of something deeper than exhaustion. "You ever think about how fast things can change?" he asked quietly, not looking at me. "All the time," I replied, setting down my tool bag. "I used to be the guy everyone called. Everyone came to me. Now I feel like a ghost in my own life." I didn't answer. Let him speak. He turned to face me. "I know I was arrogant. I looked down on you, on everyone who didn't fit into my world. But now I realize I built everything on sand. Money, status, connections, they don't mean anything if you lose yourself in the process." I nodded slowly. "Took you long enough to figure that out." "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "But I need you to know. I see you now. I see how strong you are." It was the first time I truly saw him not as an adversary, but as a man stripped of pretense. "You know," I said, "when I was 14, my dad lost his job at the mill. We lived off canned soup and hope for 6 months. No one helped us. But we didn't beg either. We built ourselves back." Bradley looked down. "I'm not asking for a handout anymore," he said. "But I am asking for a second chance." He offered his hand, and I took it, not because I wanted to, but because I'd already won. Over the next few weeks, things changed quickly. Neil Forsberg offered me a long-term contract as the electrical lead for 2 more commercial developments. I hired Theo full-time, then brought on Marisol, a brilliant young engineer I'd once trained. Together, we founded CT Electrical and Design. Within 3 months, I went from being the neighborhood electrician to a business owner with real capital, a waiting list of clients, and control over my schedule. My old truck? I gave it to another struggling tradesman who reminded me of a younger version of myself. Then I bought a used Dodge Ram. Not flashy, but reliable. Just like me. Bradley, on the other hand, was unraveling faster than I expected. News broke of more lawsuits. McAllister Holdings was being audited. His accounts were frozen, and several of his properties were repossessed. One morning, Rachel handed me the paper with the headline, "Local Real Estate Mogul Under Fire. Assets Frozen Amidst Mismanagement Probe." I felt no joy reading it, but I did feel justice. A few days later, as I was wrapping up a lighting job for a mid-sized medical clinic, I got a call. It was Bradley.
"Caleb," he said.
I lost the house. I sat down slowly on the back of my truck. "What happened?" "Foreclosure. Couldn't keep up with the balloon payment. The bank took it yesterday." I imagine the marble columns, the granite countertops, the swimming pool, all gone. "I need somewhere to stay," he continued, voice barely above a whisper. "Just for a week. Just till I figure something out." I was stunned into silence. "You're asking to stay with me?" I said, barely able to say it.
"Yeah."
The same man who mocked my cracked driveway and peeling paint now needed a roof. "I'll sleep on the floor," he added. "Or in the garage." I thought of Aubrey, of Rachel, of everything he had once symbolized. And I thought of the lesson my dad taught me a long time ago. Character isn't how you treat people when you're on top. It's how you carry others when you've made it. So I said yes.
He moved in that night.
One duffel bag. One defeated expression. I gave him the pull-out couch in the den. The next morning, as I made coffee, he shuffled into the kitchen. "This house smells like cinnamon," he said. "Aubrey likes it when we bake," I replied, handing him a cup.
He sat down.
"You know, I used to walk past here and think you were stuck." "I was never stuck," I said. "I was just building slower than you." That week, he helped clean the gutters, repaint the fence, and even fixed a broken kitchen tile. It was humbling for both of us. One afternoon, Rachel came home from a shift and found Bradley wiping down the kitchen counters. She raised an eyebrow. Should I be concerned? He's our new intern, I said with a grin. Bradley chuckled. I'm learning humility. Looks good on you, Rachel replied. One Friday evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops and the sky turned sherbet orange, we sat out on the porch. Aubrey was drawing on the sidewalk, and the smell of grilled corn wafted from the backyard. Caleb, Bradley said, I know I've taken a lot from you.
Time.
Energy. Patience. But if you'll let me, I want to give something back. He handed me a document. It was a partnership agreement, legally drafted. You're starting over, I said. And you want to do it with me? You saved my reputation, he said. I want to rebuild something real this time. Not some paper empire. A business that does actual good. Something solid. Like you. I scanned the paper. 50-50. Equal control. Transparent finances. I looked at him. You sure? I'm sure. I shook his hand. And for the first time it felt like a handshake between equals. Of course, not everyone understood. Some friends questioned my decision. You're letting the same guy who mocked you become your partner? But I didn't care. Because I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it to prove something bigger. That revenge isn't always about watching someone fall. Sometimes it's watching someone rise because of you. That's real power. That's legacy. 1 year later, CT McAllister Design and Power is one of the fastest-growing contractor firms in the region. We hire locally, train apprentices, and donate to public schools. I still drive past that old mansion sometimes. It's owned by a family of 7 now, immigrants who bought it through a housing equity program. And every time I do, I smile. Because the man who once looked down on me now sits across from me, every morning, asking, how can we build something that lasts? And every morning, I reply, start with respect. And with integrity. One thing about success, they never prepare you for the pressure it brings. A year into our partnership, CT McAllister Design and Power was thriving. We had landed a multi-million-dollar contract to restore and upgrade the Easton Community Complex, a historical landmark that had fallen into disrepair. It was our biggest project yet, a chance to show what two men once enemies could build when pride took a backseat to purpose. But success also attracts shadows. It started with an email, then a phone call, then a visit. An investor group, the Brightworth Consortium, offered us a staggering deal. They wanted to buy our company outright for $12.5 million, with an option to retain us both as salaried directors. On paper, it looked like a golden ticket. Early retirement, security, recognition. Bradley was all in. He came to my house that night, contract in hand. This is it, Caleb, he said. Everything we've worked for. We can finally breathe. I studied the offer, flipping through the pages. They want to rebrand the company, I said. Cut costs. Outsource labor. Lay off half the crew. Bradley looked away. Standard procedure. Nothing personal. They also want to terminate the community training programs. He shifted uncomfortably. Yes, but we can negotiate. No, I said firmly. That's not negotiable. Bradley's face tightened. Come on, Caleb. Do you know how rare it is to get a number like this? You were fixing fuses for $200 a job not long ago. This is freedom. I stood slowly. Freedom at what cost? We built this to be different. You said it yourself, something real. Something lasting. His eyes burned into mine. This could save me. That hit deeper than I expected. This isn't about saving you, I replied. It's about selling out the very thing that saved us. He slammed the contract onto the table. You're making a mistake. No, I said. You are. That night, we parted without shaking hands. The next day, I arrived at the Easton site early. The crew was already there, Theo, Marisol, even young Marcus, a 17-year-old apprentice from the local high school program. They looked up as I approached. You good, boss? Theo asked. I nodded. Just pressure. But we're built for pressure. We got to work. Later that afternoon, Bradley showed up. His suit was crisp, his jaw locked. He pulled me aside, away from the crew.
I signed it, he said.
I blinked. What? The buyout. I took the deal. A strange stillness fell between us. They'll split the firm, he continued. They're keeping me on board. You can stay too if you reconsider. And if I don't? He hesitated. They'll dissolve your side of the ownership. You'll get a payout. Walk away clean. I took a deep breath. You do what you need to do, I said. But I'm not leaving these people. I'm not abandoning what we built. If I have to walk away from the company, I will. But I won't walk away from who I am. For the first time, Bradley looked genuinely torn. I didn't mean for it to be like this. But it is, I said. You made your choice. I left him standing there, right where I once stood, holding a toolbox, feeling invisible. Except now the roles had reversed. 2 days later, I met with a lawyer, Ms. Linda Chan, sharp as steel. We can fight the dissolution clause, she said, scanning the original partnership contract. If you can prove that the company's direction is diverging from the founding mission, you have leverage. Enough to split it? I asked. Enough to either block the acquisition or carve out your share and walk away with a client list, team, and brand. I nodded. Then let's fight. What followed was 3 weeks of tense emails, legal maneuvering, board meetings, and community petitions. Turns out, when you work with integrity, people stand behind you. Every contractor, apprentice, nonprofit, and training center we had partnered with came to my defense. Public support exploded. One morning, I woke to find a local news article. The Electric Divide, Integrity versus Acquisition in C.T. McAllister Split. The headline said it all. By the end of the month, Bradley was forced to the table. We met in a private mediation, no lawyers, just the two of us and a mediator. I never wanted to be your enemy again, he said softly. You're not my enemy, Bradley, I replied. You're your own. He slid a folder across the table. I opened it. It was a proposal. He was offering me the full brand, staff, clients, and community contracts. He'd take his buyout and walk away. You were right, he said. I almost lost everything again. But this time, I stopped before it was too late. I stared at him for a long moment, then extended my hand. This time, he took it with humility. When the deal finalized, I stood before my team in our new office, no longer a co-founder, but sole owner of CT Design and Power. We're not just electricians or project managers, I said. We're builders of second chances. Proof that grit still matters. That dignity still wins. They clapped, not out of obligation, but out of belief. That night, as the sun set over the city skyline, I stood on the same porch where Bradley once mocked me. Only now, my house was repainted, my truck new, my niece playing in the yard while Rachel grilled corn nearby. Bradley passed by on foot, alone, hands in his pockets. We nodded at each other. No smugness. No bitterness. Just two men who had lived long enough to know that sometimes the biggest climb is back to who you were meant to be. It's been 18 months since that day in mediation. Since I walked away not just with a business, but with my integrity intact. CT Design and Power isn't just thriving, it's evolving. We expanded into sustainable energy projects. Our team now includes over 40 full-time staff, with a rotation of apprentices from 5 local high schools. Every year, we fund scholarships for students interested in the trades, those who were like me, once seen as too ordinary to matter. I remember standing in front of the first scholarship recipient, a shy 18-year-old named Darius Banks, and handing him a check. You believed in me when nobody else did, he whispered, tears welling up. I put my hand on his shoulder. Don't ever let someone else's ceiling become your limit. That became our new motto. Meanwhile, life at home found a different rhythm. Rachel met someone, a gentle, funny school counselor named Malik, and they're talking about marriage. Aubrey's now 8, smarter than ever, still drawing hearts on the driveway and occasionally designing house blueprints made of Legos. We painted the house light blue. Planted hydrangeas along the edge of the porch. That rusted old truck that once symbolized my limitations It's now parked in the training bay of our education center, mounted as a tribute with a plaque that reads, "Where the spark began." As for Bradley, his story didn't end with a split. He left town for a few months. Rumor was he moved in with a cousin in Charlotte, tried consulting for a while. Then one day, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address.
Caleb.
I used to think power came from being admired, feared, or envied. But you showed me real power lives in respect, compassion, and consistency. You beat me, not by fighting but by refusing to. I hope I get to rebuild something good again someday. Maybe not with millions, but maybe with meaning. I'm rooting for you. Bradley. I folded the letter carefully and kept it in my office drawer. Not because I needed it, but because it reminded me that transformation is possible, even for those we once saw as impossible. One rainy Thursday, I visited his old mansion on Willow Creek Lane. It now belonged to a nonprofit that provides housing for veterans. I stood across the street, right where he once stood, mocking my peeling paint and dented hood, and smiled. Poetic justice doesn't always need applause. Sometimes it just needs peace. And I had that now. We were invited to speak at the Georgia State Business Conference last fall. I stood behind the podium, looking out at a sea of professionals, executives, and students. "My name is Caleb Thomas," I began, "and I started as a kid with calloused hands and a dream no one took seriously." The crowd was quiet. I was told to aim low.
Stay in my lane.
But lanes are meant to be widened, and dreams, especially humble ones, are often the most powerful. I paused, my voice steady. "Today, I run a company that employs dozens, feeds families, trains future leaders, and proves one simple truth. You can't look down on someone unless you're already beneath them." The room erupted in applause. Later that night, a man approached me in the lobby. Gray suit, neat haircut, firm handshake. "I'm from the Brightworth Consortium," he said. "We made a mistake last time. We'd like to revisit the acquisition if you're open to." I didn't even let him finish. "We're not for sale," I said with a calm smile. "But thanks for the compliment." I got home late, tired but fulfilled. Aubrey was asleep on the couch, a blanket tangled around her legs. Rachel had left a note on the table. "You made us all proud today. Again."
R.
I stood by the window and looked out at the neighborhood. Willow Creek Lane used to be just a place I lived. Now it was where I belonged. A few weeks later, I was cleaning out the garage when I came across an old, rusted sign. It used to hang on the gate of the original Sunset Building site. "Condemned, do not enter." I laughed softly. That building, once destined for demolition, now housed a youth tech hub and an eco-energy research facility. It had become a symbol of revival. Just like me. I hung the sign in my office, not as a warning but as a reminder. Nothing is ever beyond repair. Not buildings. Not reputations. Not people. One warm Saturday morning, I sat on the porch sipping coffee while Aubrey drew chalk stars on the steps. She looked up suddenly and asked, "Uncle Caleb?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Are we rich now?" I chuckled. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged. "Because everyone says your name like it's important. And we have a new truck. And our house smells like cinnamon again." I smiled. "Well, we're not rich the way some people think. But we have everything we need." She paused, then smiled wide. "Then I think we're super rich." I reached down and mussed her hair. "Me too, kiddo. Me too." That afternoon, we went to the park as a family, Rachel, Malik, Aubrey, and me. The sky was clear, the breeze soft, and laughter filled the air. It wasn't grand. It wasn't viral. It wasn't flashy. But it was real. And that's what I fought for all along. Not revenge. Not wealth. Not validation. But a life I could be proud of. A legacy built not on status, but on soul.